In this video, I'll be tackling more of the internet's most popular design challenges. I'll be mixing together competitors' logos, swapping the niches of famous brands, and doing an illustration challenge that'll make your head spin. And up first, we have an interesting time challenge. Now, I'm not gonna be constrained by time, because in this challenge, time will be moving backwards. See, I'm gonna take our ever-lovable Colonel Sanders right here, and redesign him to make him look like he's no longer a sweet old man, but a fiery young whippersnapper. See, the Colonel didn't start KFC until he was already at retirement age, so I'm kinda curious how his logo would have looked if he had opened his doors at a much earlier age in life. Now, apparently, this was him when he was 24 years old. Why is it that past generations always look so much older than their actual age? I mean, to me, he seems about 35 or 40 here, and like he's seen way too many things that he shouldn't have. But either way, let's kick things off by getting a little more color back into his skin. He seems to have grown a bit pale as the years went by, but I'm guessing his younger self was a little more tan. Now, I want the logo to have the same style and format as the original. All we're trying to do is give the Colonel his youth back. And that all starts by cleaning up his chin and getting rid of this white goatee, which definitely ages him. The dude had a chiseled jaw back in the day, which we'll need to get rid of some of these skin flaps if we're going to see. And of course, he wasn't yet sporting this fluffy white mustache. Just have to make sure we don't remove too much of the nose, which I will thin up just a little to give it a more youthful vibe. But even though he definitely looked more stoic in his old photos, I'm still going to give him a nice smile because everybody loves a happy, friendly mascot. And you know, we've got to get that little crease right at the edge of his mouth to make that smile feel genuine. Now, while I'm down here, it does look like in his younger days, the Colonel did show a little more neck, because there just seems to be this strange thing as when people get older, they just start wearing all of their clothes higher on their bodies. But still, most of this is going to remain in shadow because it's right below the chin. It also seems like he was more into regular ties at this point, and he hadn't quite yet picked up his affinity for that fancy country bow tie he's known for. So I'll just give him a nice little black tie, basically transforming him into an office worker. Now, his older photos didn't have him wearing glasses, but I did find some when he's a little bit older where he does, and that's probably closer to the age where he'd have enough money to actually open a restaurant, so I'm going to leave them in just because they're so iconic. I will, however, give him back his eyebrows, which definitely thinned out and got white as he grew older. And now the last thing we've got to take care of is this white hair. In his youth, the Colonel looked like he had pretty dark hair, and the only dark color we have in this logo is black, so that's what it's going to have to be. And at that point, his hairline hadn't quite receded so much, but it did look like he wore his hair in a simple comb over rather than wild and everywhere like he did when he was older. So I'll just clean this up a bit and add in that side part, which actually sat pretty far up on the head. And this area should probably just be more plain and smooth, and maybe leaving a few little twigs flowing over the side where that hair naturally lays over. I do want to keep this little shiny streak in the hair though, because not only does it help us define the edge of the glasses, but if there's one thing that people used in abundance back in those days, it was a lot of hair product. We'll just get a few extra shines up top to make everything consistent and just add some overall structure to the hair in general. And then I think the only thing really left to do is fix all that shading that I messed up along the way. And I will admit, I do like how they use the same shadow color on the white shirt as they did the skin, just gives the logo a really cool look and makes everything consistent. And so with that, we've got a Colonel Sanders that looks easily 40 years younger. He's no longer his old cantankerous self. He's simply his younger cantankerous self who would get into shootouts over gas station disputes. Now up next, we have a really fun challenge. See, I've spent basically my entire design career putting all of my focus into training one thing, my right hand. The left hand, though, I have completely abandoned. So because it's not great to put all of your eggs in one basket, I want to see if I was ever forced to continue my artistic pursuits with just my left hand, could I survive, or would I end up hopeless and destitute?
Bad change, man.
So for this challenge, I'm going to be trying to recreate this Chester the Cheetah illustration entirely with my left hand. The only trick is that I can't undo anything. If I make a mark on the canvas, it stays. Mentally prepare yourself for the absolute masterpiece that is sure to follow. So I think I want to start off with the nose, since that seems like a pretty good big landmark to go with, and I can base the rest of the body around. Already I can tell that I just can't draw very fast with this hand at all, which basically turns what should be nice long smooth marks into crumpled up noses that looks like he was punched in the face. I tell you, not being able to undo anything is extremely stressful. You don't really realize how much you rely on it until you don't have it anymore. Hence why poor Chester here looks like he needs to go to the dentist ASAP. Damn, going this slow is honestly just excruciating. It takes forever to do anything, and I'm honestly not sure the results are that much better. But I guess we'll just move on to the body now, and on to every artist's favorite part, the hands, which I can't really draw normally that well. This is what I imagine arthritis feels like when you're 80 years old. And I say we can get this nice, slick, slender body in here without making him too morbidly obese. And then we can finish off the second hand, which somehow I think turned out worse than the first. I guess in this instance, practice doesn't necessarily make perfect. Now, unfortunately, it looks like I have turned his once cool shoes into a pair of Yeezys. And so I think with that, the outline is complete. And now it's time to color. Normally, I would just use like a paint bucket tool or something here to make it easy. But for this challenge, I'm going to do it all by hand to see what kind of result we get. Try my best to stay within the lines. And you guys might find this really hard to believe, but what? I didn't even practice for this. Everything you're seeing right here is just straight up raw talent. While I'm struggling through this, I have a little surprise for you guys. Some of my most viewed videos are ones where I make realistic versions of things, like realistic logos or app icons, basically where I take a bunch of images and put them together. So I've put together a nifty video all about my top texture tips, when to use them, how to use them, how to get realistic results, and you'll get that video for free when you buy the Texture Toolkit, which is my giant library of 750 textures created specifically for artists and designers. Now let's get the shading in here real quick like, to give him a super realistic 3D form. It does look like I forgot his thumb on this hand though, so I'll go back and add that in real quick, because Lord knows I don't want him to look like this and be an amputee. I completely left out this little spot in the jaw, but I think I can squeeze it in. And I think the only thing that's left are the dozens of spots he has plastered all over his body, which in this case, it kind of just looks like I'm giving him some form of leprosy. And two, I think I'll just be honest here, I've kind of given up on any type of accuracy for these. You know, one of the most liked comments on the last video was somebody saying I should try to remake brands as if they were drawn by a child, and I think that's a pretty good description of what this turned out to be. In the end, we have determined that if I ever did lose my right hand, I just have to go get a job at the Waffle House. And up next is the Logo Mashup Challenge, where I'll be taking the Lay's logo and the Doritos logo, two of the world's largest chip brands, and combining them together into one ultimate logo. It'll be the perfect thing for people who want the thin, crunchy snap of a regular Lay's chip, but the sharp, cheesy flavor of an old-fashioned Doritos. And that all starts with the name, of course, and for this, I'm thinking of Laytos. Now I just want to get a nice font for it, so it has the nice lean of the Lay's logo, and the sharper, maybe more modern look of Doritos. But first, let me thank the sponsor of today's video, Artlist. I've used Artlist's enormous library of music and sound effects for years on the channel. It's super easy to find the music that I want. I can just search by the mood I'm looking for, or pick from a large selection of different genres. Heck, I can even search for songs with specific instruments if I want to. And what's super cool is that many of these songs are actually split into tracks. So if I want to keep the drums but leave out the guitars, I can do that, giving me ultimate control over the end result. Now, despite having amazing search, if you want another leg up, just use an artboard. You can just describe what project you're working on, like maybe a video about riding a unicycle through a scenic mountain range, and Artlist will find assets for you that it thinks are helpful, like some whimsical unicycle theme songs, or some beautiful footage of scenic mountain ranges. They've got super simple plans to choose from, so if you're a content creator like me, or maybe you're just working on client projects, you can use all these great assets without having to worry about copyright strikes or legal issues. They even have plugins and extensions to help you work with the Artlist library straight from your favorite editing software like Premiere Pro. So whether you need soundtracks to set the mood, sound effects to add impact, amazing visuals through videos, or even some LUTs to make your personal footage look great, then Artlist has you covered. So use my link down below to get 2 months free for any annual plan. Sincerely, I've used Artlist for years. It really is great, and I appreciate them sponsoring this video. And I think to pull even further from that Doritos look, I want to make the letters white to give them a black stroke. And honestly, I really just kind of like that little red line around the Doritos letters, so I might just add that in too, followed by one last outline to help separate it from any light background. So what if I just came in here and added a few serifs on these letters to help bring back some of those traditional vibes the original Lay's text had? Why don't we give the top of this T a cool little slant? Another thing both of these original logos had was some type of 3D look to them, so why don't we go with this kind of gray shadow of the Doritos? Let's just keep the shadow a little more simple without the bounce light, kind of like the Lay's. So I'll just duplicate that text and shift it down to add in the shadow, and then just touch up these corners so everything lines up. And now we've got to figure out what type of icon or imagery is going to go around this logo. Of course, on the original Lay's, we have like this sunshine type of thing that has a banner wrapped around it, and on the Doritos, it's just like a, well, I'm not really sure what it is, kind of like a fiery lightning bolt triangle thing. Honestly, to me, it kind of looks like a black hole, just ripped straight from Interstellar, but instead of a sphere, it's sharp and pointy. So why don't we take this shocky portal looking thing from Doritos, put it in the shape of the circular Lay's logo, and see what we end up with. I'll start out with a single big ring to make the outline, and we'll slowly add in some colors, moving from like a dark red to a bit more of a bright one, eventually ending up with yellow, being capped off by a highlight on the end. Of course, to make it a portal, it's going to need to be black in the center. Now in the original Doritos logo, of course, its little shockwave is more smoothly rendered, but the Lay's logo is more minimal looking with like solid shading. So I think doing the portal in this solid ring setup is a good combination of both. I do think they should be tilted though, just for a little bit of extra energy. Now, of course, it wouldn't be an actual Doritos portal unless we had a bunch of little spiky things popping out everywhere. So let me try to add some of those in. I'll start by making one up here that kind of lines up with the edge. I can just duplicate that and shift it down. Some of these are honestly a bit tricky to lay out without making the whole portal seem wobbly and bumpy. But with a little finagling, I think I can get something that looks pretty good. Of course, we'll need some spikiness coming off these inner layers so it looks like they're swirling out too. But I'm wondering if I can just kind of warp it a bit to give it a bit more of a 3D look. Almost like it's tilted slightly and it's smaller in the back and closer up towards us, which I think just gives this whole thing a bunch more energy. And then finally, since both of these logos did end up using some kind of soft shading, why don't we do the same thing to this logo and just give it a little darkness here towards the letters so it kind of looks like it's curving into them, and a touch of brightness around the outer rings to give them a nice glow look. And in the end, I think this is a pretty satisfying mashup of two chip titans. It definitely leans heavily towards the Doritos visual vibe, vibe, but really focusing on the giant sphere as the main point of the logo, I think just screams Lay's potato chips. I think the only question here is if double the logos means double the air in the bags. And now on to the next challenge. And I'm wondering, have you ever noticed how looking at somebody upside down sometimes makes them look like a completely different person? Like half the time you wouldn't even recognize them because we're so used to seeing people's faces right side up. So for this challenge, I thought it'd be fun to see how accurately I could recreate a logo drawing it upside down. I think it's gonna be quite a different experience, but basically what I wanna do is create an upside down version of the Nesquik rabbit's head, get it as close as I can, and at the end, I'll flip it up, stick it on his body, and we'll compare the two. I'll just start with a quick little sketch to try to get the rough shapes of the head down. This dude's got some super large cheeks. My brain's already starting to hurt trying to figure out which way things should bend. Just trying to get this perspective right. Get the mouth starting to take shape, I think. It looks like I drew those initial cheeks way too low, and I have a feeling those types of inaccuracies are going to pile up quite high. So I need to expand this overall section here, get a little more drawn in on this side. Now the eye is supposed to be somewhere right above this nose, the other eye right next to it. So his pupils are to the left in the original image, which means they'll be on the right in this upside down version. Now I don't know what this rabbit's done to his hair, but it kind of looks like he has one of those sea anemones from Nemo just laying right on top of it. And the last pieces of the puzzle here are the big flowing ears. It's honestly really hard to tell how big to make these things. I feel like it's both too big and too short at the same time somehow. Thinking something like that has to be pretty close, so I'm just gonna move on to doing final outlines. I'll try to be as careful as I can with these to get them somewhat accurate. I realized I had drawn the nose upside down. You know, they say it's always the second eye that's the hardest, but frankly, both of these were a pain. I can't help but think I've screwed up this mouth terribly. I guess it just is what it is. That big old tooth in there. Oh, wait, that's facing the wrong way. That should be better. It's kind of feeling like on my sketch, I really made the mouth too big, but I do feel like this is getting closer. I guess I'll just throw in the neck here as a nice connection point for when we swap out the heads, and then I can finish it off with the ears. And so now if we turn off that sketch layer and just see the line work, we kind of get an idea of what this is going to look like. Honestly, it's a little rougher than I imagined, but we've still got some shading to do, so maybe it'll improve after that. I'll just get the main colors in first as kind of a base layer. I'm not going to go too crazy with all the shading. I just want to get something kind of close. And then why don't we just start with the tongue, getting in some of those harsher shadows. Similar thing for the nose, of course, with a nice wet shine on top of that. Get some more detail into those eyes, because that's one of the most important parts. Kind of the soul of the character, you know? I'm not sure what kind of soul this thing has, but I guess that is yet to be seen. It's definitely a character that has a ton of shading, though. It definitely does add a lot to the character in terms of depth and complexity and just overall interest, I think. Now the tan part starts to get its shading to help round out the nose and give some shape around this mouth region. And then our last step is going to be getting in some of these highlights around the different tufts of fur and stuff, which are surprisingly pretty bright in a lot of places. You know, I feel like it's not shaping up too badly, but at the same time, I just really can't tell. And lastly, just the highlights on the brown part of the fur will wrap it up, though there is quite a bit of those as well. I didn't really realize how detailed this thing is until you start trying to make it. And it's certainly not perfect, but honestly, I'm tired of working on it, and I'm just gonna call that done. Okay, so let me duplicate our bunny here, chop off his head. Now for the moment of truth. Oh boy, here we go. Well guys, there is the new Nesquik rabbit. Honestly, I'm not sure what I was expecting, but something like this is probably it. You know, I just realized I didn't include the whiskers at all, but I mean, would that have saved it? I don't think so. I mean, I think most of the shapes are there. It just goes to show you how much the little details and the exact positions of things make a huge difference in the final outcome. It's sad to say, but I literally spent an hour on this and that's all I've got to show for it. But it's definitely something you should try yourself. It's actually quite a bit of fun, but it is super hard. I guess to wrap it up, I found out that this guy's name is Quickie, so I think I'll name this guy Toxie, because he looks like he crawled straight out of a toxic waste dump. And up next, I'm going to be swapping the niche of one of the most famous companies in the world, Apple. Why is a company that's focused on making phones and computers named Apple? You know, it's kind of confusing. So what if their name was a little more relevant to what they actually sold? Apples are food. Food is sold at restaurants. So I'm wondering what would happen if Apple threw away their iPhones and Macs, picked up a greasy old spatula, and opened up their very own fast food style restaurant. If we look at the plethora of other fast food logos, you'll see that we need something that's very vibrant and colorful, that really pops. We've got to stand out in a sea of chains that are fighting for everybody's attention. So we're going to have to check out this over minimal black and white logo and whip out a new brand for Apple that matches the modern fast food standards. Now with a name like Apple, people might think our fast food chain is a little too healthy and thus avoid it. But I'm thinking maybe if we get a fun bubbly font like this, we can make it feel more like a cool, exciting place to go. I mean, maybe we can even get a little tilt on that to up the energy. And I think making this first letter slightly bigger than the rest will help this feel more like a proper capitalized name, even though all the letters are uppercase. Now I'm thinking we need some color on this, and there is no color more true to the fast food world than yellow. But we might need an outline on that just to help it stand out from lighter backgrounds like this. And to really help this stand out, I'm thinking of making some of these letters a bit 3D. Just gotta make sure we connect everything properly. Then how about some subtle highlights for a nice shine across that whole logo. Alrighty, so now I think I need something on here that helps people know that this is a restaurant. And I'm thinking about maybe attaching a little sign under here. Something that kind of resembles like a wooden plank that can just be rotated to fit the same angle as the letters. Maybe I'll even have it flare out a bit just so it's not so square square and stiff looking. And on that can go our tagline, fast and fresh. That way we still know it's fast food, but saying it's fresh kind of plays off the fact that apple sounds a little healthy. Kind of like a Subway vibe here. Now I don't really like these big empty spots here in the logo, so I might just kind of fill those in and get rid of them. That way everything looks more like a solid piece. But of course, it would not be an Apple logo without an illustration of an apple. So let's get a big red delicious one on here. Make it nice and full, but of course we still have to have Apple's signature bite mark out of it. We need that bite to look a little more realistic, so let's get some big teeth marks in here with a little stroke around that to match the cartoony outline of the rest of the apple. And of course after that, our apple's gonna need a proper stem with a little shading on it to make it look 3D. We'll have a nice flowing leaf sitting right next to that with that quintessential split down the middle and a shadow running along that side edge to give it some depth. And speaking of depth, we need to make sure this bite mark doesn't look like a flat sticker slapped on there. So I'll make it look more caved in with a nice shadow and some edges to help show the marks left by the teeth. Since everything else has shading, we might as well put some on the apple itself with some nice bounce lighting to give it a really good rounded look. And a few shines on the skin to make it look extra delicious because shiny food just looks better for some reason. And you know, just seeing an apple here with a big bite taken out of it just kind of makes you wonder, like, how old is it? Did somebody chomp on this 2 weeks ago and then just leave it here? Not the greatest mood for a restaurant. So why don't we add in some nice little juicy drips, kind of just splattering off of there. Like you can almost hear that nice crunch sound as those juices splatter off. And you know, I just about forgot that little iconic pit in the center, which you'll find on basically every apple out there. And so if Apple ever decided to shut down their business making billions of dollars a year to start a restaurant that would probably go under in a couple months, I could see them going with a logo kind of like this. Don't forget to go grab my texture toolkit along with that new texture video I launched. And if you want to see me redesign modern products to make them look super vintage, then check out this video right here.